I think I find this fascinating. This Justin Guest piece in Politico really had me scratching my head. He went out and asked a bunch of white folks if, we're thinking of creating a new party and it's going to be devoted to stopping mass immigration, providing American jobs to American workers, preserving America's Christian heritage, and stopping the threat of Islam. 3 out of the 4 of those are basically racist dog whistles. 65% of white people said, hey, sign me up. I hope that 65% of white people are not responding to racist dog whistles and that instead they're responding to the provide American jobs to American workers. But God only knows. But the theory here of the article is that Trumpism, Donald Trump has started something that is just going to keep on rolling and get worse and worse. Au contraire. Donald Trump hasn't started anything. Donald Trump is simply saying out loud in blunt and bumper sticker language the stuff that Fox so-called news has been saying for what, 20 years they've been around? 30 years, however long it's been. I think it's been 20 years. No, I think it's been 30 years. But whatever. He's just saying what right-wing hate radio says. I mean, him and Michael Savage fine-tuned the shtick together. It's what he is saying is no different than Ronald Reagan going to Philadelphia, Mississippi to give his first speech when he was running for president of the United States. The very first speech he gave as the official Republican candidate was just down the road from the graves or where they were buried. I'm guessing they're not buried there any longer, but where after the local police and vigilantes murdered Goodman, Schwimmer, and Cheney, it took them several days to find their bodies, these 3 civil rights workers. I mean, this is the Mississippi burn. They made a movie out of this. This was a big deal in the 60s. Arguably, and nobody was arrested or convicted for it, at least at the time. And certainly by 1980, nobody had been, to the best of my knowledge. And this is where Reagan goes to talk about states' rights, which we all know is dog whistle phrase for, let Mississippi keep preventing black people from their schools, or let Virginia keep their public schools shut down because the federal government says if you have a public school, it has to be integrated. I'll bet most Americans don't even know that for an entire year, the state of Virginia closed all their public schools in protest of integration back in the 60s. But this so-called Trumpism, this is not new. This is Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George Bush Republicanism. It's just that instead of saying it with the dog whistle, I mean, Lee Atwater laid this thing out. He just laid it out. And that was back in 1980. He laid it out when he was helping to run the Reagan campaign. And Lee Atwater said, we used to use the N-word, but then that would have been the 50s, right? But then, yeah, I do. But then we had to stop using the N-word, so we found another way to say the same thing to our white voters. We started talking about forced busing, which of course everybody knows means black people. And then the forced busing thing kind of faded from. But then it got a little more sophisticated, a little more subtle, and really all we had to say was start cutting government programs, because everybody knows that, or all the white people believe that if you cut government programs, you hurt black people. And so that became the way that the Republicans spoke in code. And at that point, it was so abstract that the news media was covering it as if they were actually talking about something that was meaningful, when all they were saying was, we got to maintain white privilege, we've got to maintain white supremacy. Here's Lee Atwater laying this thing out at a Republican Party meeting.
You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968 you can't say that hurts or backfires, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
See, this was you know, in the early 80s, he was saying this at a time that the Republican Party was being accused of being a racist party. Gee, what a surprise, right? The Reagan Democrats were the Nixon Democrats, were the white Southerners who were really, really upset about the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Rights Act. And here's Lee Atwater talking about how to talk to those people, how to bring them into the Republican Party. We get, you know, and without being called racists. How do we reinvent the Republican Party? You know, how do we take Nixon's Southern strategy, which was an explicit appropriation of George Wallace's positions? How do we take, and not just George Wallace, obviously. I mean, this was the, you know, prior to the 1950s. This was, or the 60s. This was the Democratic Party in the South. And the Republicans were like, we need those voters. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arkansas, they all used to vote solidly Democratic. Because it used to be that the Democratic Party was the leftover remnant of the Confederacy. It was the party of segregation, in this, at least in the South. I think you could probably say in much of America. Pre-1930. And then the Democratic Party started moving forward on race relations. Harry Truman integrating the military, but you know, it really hit its peak in the 60s with LBJ and the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act. And at that point, that was the point at which the white racists said enough already. And that was the point at which the Republican Party said, boy, do we have an opportunity. We can get all these white Southern people who are just hysterical about race to vote for insane economic policies that are going to destroy their own lives and make us rich, us Republicans, simply by, you know, talking to them in code. And we got a new code. It's government bad. Why is government bad? Because it helps black people. And now they've expanded that, of course. Oh, my God, government's bad. It's helping black people. It's helping gays. It's helping lesbians, transgender people. Oh, my God, we can't have that. We can't have government support, you know, helping Hispanics. We can't have government helping, you know, Native American people of color. We can't have that. We got to cut this government. So, you know, all this talk about Donald Trump being some sort of, you know, weird aberration and a new thing, and it's all nonsense. Donald Trump is a good old-fashioned Republican. He might not have started out that way. He might, I think he was politically an atheist, basically, or an agnostic. He just gave money to whoever would, you know, give him the most. It was, you know, Trump was always all out for himself. But now that he's had to pick a political party, he went with the racists. He went with the bigots. He went with the authoritarian. But there's nothing new here. And this is, I think, one of the big mistakes that both the political class and the media are making is trying to behave as if Donald Trump is some weird aberration. I'm sorry, Mike Pence is pursuing the same policies. Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are pursuing the same policies.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I mean, Trump might get a little out there enough to make the news every now and then, but it's basically Republicans.